So last November, we saw how to win if you have a queen against a king. You make a box and you checkmate them in the corner. Now it becomes a little problematic if they have a pawn, because of course this pawn can become a queen, and that would, they can then block all the checks. So essentially, you need to stop the pawn from queening and then take it, and then take the pawn, and then you can perform checkmate as you normally would with a queen. So in order to block this pawn from queening, we can either keep giving checks or we can put a piece in front of it. So in this case, it's a lot simpler because we don't need to do anything complicated. All we need to do is bring our queen in front of the pawn. Then it can never become queen, because if we, that happens to be a check as well. So if we bring our queen here, their king can never attack our queen because our queen attacks all of the squares around our queen. So we can just leave our queen there. They'll bring their pawn in. We bring our king in. They can bring their pawn forward. We can bring our king forward again. Okay, they have to start moving their king now. And we keep marching our king in until we have two attackers on this pawn, and then we can take the pawn and checkmate as we would normally do with the queen. Okay. So things get a little bit more complicated though when that pawn is getting close to the end of the board. For example, if it is on b7 already. So in this case, the king is in front of the pawn, so we have a free move because the pawn cannot become a queen just yet. So we get some time, and we can use that time to bring our king in. Now the problem is that white will of course try and queen their pawn, so they'll get the king out of the way of the pawn. And now, okay, we have a few options for checks. We can check here, we can check here, here, or here. But essentially, if it's not check, then they'll make a queen. We can also pin the pawn, but that shouldn't be necessary. So the fastest way of going about this is to give a check here, and then they have to move their king. Now we can give a check here, and they have to protect their pawn again. And now we give the crucial check on c6. So the problem here for white is that they want to protect their pawn, but they also want to leave the queening square open, but they can't do both. So they, if they go this way, then you can take the pawn and bring the king in and checkmate as we normally would. Or if they go this way, now we get another free move, and we can bring our king in a step further. So white tries to escape again. Now we can pin white if they go up the board, of course. Then we can just block the pawn. So that becomes simple now because white can't do much. Alternatively, if white goes into the corner, then we can give a check here. It can't go off the board. There is no -1 file. So, oops. So then they have to go back in front of the pawn, and we bring the king in again. And now they go this way, and we can keep on doing this until we get our king right into position. So let's say they go here to stop to threaten queening. So if we were to bring our king in here, let's say, that would be a huge mistake because they make a queen, and now they can start giving their own checks, and this will end up as a draw. In some situations, maybe you can bring your king in here because if they make a queen, then you can make checkmate still. But there is no need to overcomplicate things. You can instead give check here. They have to keep protecting their pawn. You can give check again here. This check is the crucial one because this is the one where they have to make a decision whether they want to protect the pawn or block the pawn. So if they block the pawn, then we can carry on bringing our king in and being careful not to stalemate. So their king moves out of the way of the pawn. We pin again. They go into the corner. They can make a check. And their king is forced back in front of the pawn. And here we get another free move. And now we are close enough to make it checkmate. So that is if the pawn is a b pawn. Now, is it the same for a d pawn or an e pawn or a g pawn? Well, if it was a G pawn, it would just be completely symmetric. So if we set that up, oops. So this is completely symmetric, and we can perform the same maneuvers. So B and G pawn are equivalent, the same way D and E pawn are also equivalent. So that is D is equivalent to E pawn and E is equivalent to D pawn. B and D are slightly different, but we'll see if the same process works by moving this pawn a couple of squares to the right. So okay, of course it's white's move, so let's say they don't queen their pawn. So we can deliver a check, and they try and queen their pawn, we deliver another check. So now we want to stop their pawn from queening, so we need to cover this square. So we could go here, that would cover this square, but then they can bring their king back, and we wouldn't have made much progress. So if we go queen here, then they can't go king c2, instead they have to go king c1. And now the same check that we were making earlier to force them to make a decision, they're forced to make a decision. They can go this way or they can go this way. And if they go this way, we take the pawn. And it's not stalemate, of course, because they have an extra square over here. Or if they go, oops, or if they go this way, then we bring the king in. So that's good. We can do this all the way to the end until our king is right up with the pawn, and then being careful, of course, not to stalemate. And then we take the pawn, and then we can checkmate them. Okay, so that is the D and E pawn. So it works for the B pawn, the D pawn, the E pawn, and the G pawn. Now we can make things even more complicated by moving the pawn to the bishop's file. So the queen can make a check, and the king goes a direction. Now we threaten the pawn, and the king is forced to come here. And now we give the check that we normally would have. So the problem here, though, is that, so of course you can even make a puzzle out of this. So white to play, what should white do? So you can take a moment to think about it. Or is this any different to the G and to the knight's pawn and the queen or king pawn? So if we go this way, of course, then we've seen this one before. Black brings their king in, and white has nothing much to do. Well, they can come out and more checks until the black king comes sufficiently close. However, the white has the other option. So now if they move their king into the corner, and white rushes in and takes this pawn, this is of course stalemate because white has no more squares to the left. So that would be a draw, and that would probably be not what black was looking for when they went with the queen against a pawn, but there isn't anything else they can do. So this with the bishop's pawn is in fact a draw. There are of course exceptions where the king is close enough and they can try and get a checkmate, but otherwise this is a draw, because every time you get into this position where normally the white king would be forced to make a decision, white just goes into the corner, and there is no way to take this pawn. If they try and bring their king in, then a queen comes into the game. Oh, sorry, I set this up the wrong way around. Okay, then the queen would come into the game, and that would be a draw. So that is with the bishop's pawn. now for a rook pawn. The colors might swap around here. Oh no, they don't. Okay, so black to play again. White is trying to make a queen. We could flip the board if so white is coming down the board, trying to make a queen. So if black makes a nothing move, like so, then white makes a queen, and this would be a draw because you can try and make a skewer or something, but white just moves their king and protects the queen. So if you take the queen, nothing's happening. You can try other skewers, but white's not going to come up the board. They just keep protecting their queen. So yeah, you have to keep making checks, and so normally you would think that white is having to be forced into making a decision. Do they go this way and let you take the pawn, which would be an easy win for black, or do they go? And of course, this wouldn't be stalemate, unlike with the bishop pawn. Or do they go into the corner? So let's try going into the corner. So okay, right, the pawn can't queen. So we can casually bring up the king, but of course this is stalemate because the white king has no more squares. So this would also be a draw. We could try and do something though. There's some tricks we can try. For example, we can try bringing our king in like this, because now we blocked off our own queen. But of course, white doesn't need to go into the corner here. They can just go this way, and now black has to stop the pawn from queening. So white can threaten queening again, and there's checks. But as soon as you go in front of the pawn, then okay, this would actually lose. But if so, until you're forced into making the decision, you can keep going in front of the pawn. You a check here, and then you go into the corner. So in this crucial position, when you have to make a decision, when your pawn is under attack, you can go into the corner, and as white, you are completely safe. So the rook's pawn in most situations is a draw. Of course, there are exceptions again because the king is getting quite close here. So in fact, now it might even be winning for black because you can give a check and another check, and now you can start and another check even, and then you can bring in the king. So sometimes you can do something, but unless the king is sufficiently close to begin with, the rook pawn is also a draw. So now we have a completely original puzzle here, which will depend entirely on the rook's pawn. So white to play and win. So of course, it's a strange position, but it could be natural. It could occur naturally. Let's say white had gotten their king around from having castled like so. Black had castled the other way and then brought their king in this way. And so it ends up like this. White is trying to queen their pawn here or here, and black will queen their pawn here or here. So when you're calculating an ending like this, you want to count how many moves you're making and how many moves your opponent is making. In this situation, we're playing as white. In the last few games we were playing as the black had the queen. But in this situation, white will actually make the queen first. So you have arrows which you can draw, which is very helpful compared to in real life, where you actually have to sort of keep the numbers in your head. So if white tries to make a queen, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and the other way is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. I may have miscounted there. So black. So okay. So of course, if you go after a pawn, black will have to go after the opposite pawn because otherwise you lose, like so. So and if you go after the same pawn, In fact, this might be a draw. Okay, I might have messed this up, but essentially, you want to keep your in this fourth position. A consideration is you want to keep you want to leave your opponent with the G pawn. You don't want to leave them with the F pawn, because if they get their F pawn to the end of the to the second rank, then that's a draw. It's the C pawn, but the bishop's pawn essentially. If they get this one to the second rank, then it's a draw. Whereas if this one gets to the second rank, then it is then you can still win once you've made your queen. So you make your queen, and they'll have their pawn on the second rank, and you make a draw. Okay. So essentially, the moral of the story is you go after this pawn, not that pawn. That way, when you make a queen in the end, it's all fine. Okay. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, I don't have any questions, but thank you so much for the class. It was really interesting. And yeah, I think we can stop the recording now.
Okay. Yeah, we'll stop.